Great. Madam Administrator, thank you again for a very quick and forward-leaning response, including your joining me and others in Louisiana on the ground to see the devastation. Very pleased in many ways with the SBA response, and many of those you have outlined. My questions are going to focus on where I think we need to do better, and I don't mean to suggest by focusing on that the overall grade is poor. It's not. But I do want to focus on that. The first one in particular, I got to tell you, sort of gets my goat, and let me explain why. As you know, the RISE Act was passed into law nearly 10 months ago, and it included language which the SBA asked for to allow you to provide supplemental funding after disasters to SBDCs, women's business centers, and SCORE chapters in the disaster area without matching funds. And as you also know, when you were on the ground in Louisiana, I specifically asked you to make those appropriate grants under that authority. This is a big disaster, and this is exactly the circumstance that was designed for. So far, the SBA has given us the response, the regs aren't finished, we can't do that. Now, I got to tell you, that's an unacceptable response given that you did it after Sandy without statutory authority. No statutory language, you did it ad hoc after Sandy. You asked us to put it in statute. We did. We modeled it specifically in terms of what you did after Sandy, which seemed to work. Because it worked and because it could be done quickly. 2 years after the request, there are no regs and you say you can't do it. So that really doesn't seem to make sense since you did it after Sandy without even the statutory framework.
Yes. Honestly, Senator, I've met with my team since you and I have talked about that, and so thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I want to tell you that it is now in the works, and I think we're ready to deploy those resources eminently. So thank you. You know, it is, we had, you know, I don't want to make excuses for ourselves except to say that I'm making up for so many SOPs and regulations that had not been put in place since the Reagan era. And the GAO called SBA out on this, and so I've gone back 30 years to try to bring up regulations, and I must tell you that we've been working with great speed and efficiency, and you would be very impressed at how many we've addressed back since then. And so it's just one of those things that it got in queue, but understanding the criticality of this, once it was brought to my attention, I addressed it immediately, and those funds are ready to be released.
Great. That's great news. Thank you. Madam Administrator, another relevant program which has not been acted upon was the Immediate Disaster Assistance Program. It was in the 2008 Farm Bill. It was a disaster loan program, and the SBA was asked to implement that within a year, received $3 million appropriation to fund a pilot in 2010, but so far no loan has been written under that program.
All right.
So that also could be a very relevant tool, helpful to us. Where does that stand, and when can we see some action? My concern is twofold. Number one, it's a disaster loan program, obviously could be helpful right now, mandated in 2008, and basically nothing's been done. My second concern is broader, that a lot of agencies these days seem to take mandatory statutory language as a suggestion. It's not. It's the law.
Mr. Chairman, on this, I agreed with you on the last one because we had an awfully long queue, and the GAO was on us about so many SOPs. Again, I'm going back to Reagan and Bush and trying to catch up, you know, in the 2 years that I have here, and we've done a superb job. But I concede that, you know, we've now gotten to the SBDC's one that you just suggested. But on this one, I do have to take a little exception because this is not a loan that SBA puts out. You know that this is one that the private sector, the IDAP, is one that the banks were asked to put out. We've actually promulgated the regs, put out the rule, empowered the banks to do it, and quite frankly, the banks just don't want to do it. I don't have much more authority to force a private sector financial institution to process a loan that they don't want to process. But what I did do, and I hope that I get some good merit points on this, is absent that, in the RISE Act, you recall that we came to you and said, absent that, what you're trying to achieve is you're trying to get some immediate dollars in the hands of the disaster victims. And so that's why we put in this $25,000 disaster assistance approval that we can now deploy immediately. And so we think that it gets to the same goal. But we will continue to implore upon financial institutions, and they need to do this. We have talked to them, met with them. They want some refinements. We'd be happy to share with you what those refinements are. The idea that a $10,000 loan could be financed for 10 years at a very, very low interest rate is not something that's attractive to them. It takes a lot of time to underwrite a loan and to process it. So clearly you can understand why a financial institution doesn't want to do this. I'm not making excuses for them. I'm simply saying that we've come up with, we think, is a remedy that allows the SBA to come in directly with our own $25,000 loan. That actually achieves the same thing.
Well, besides that remedy, if you could get to us all of the bank's suggested tweaks or clarifications, because again, this is since 2008. So if we need to make tweaks, clarifications to make it work, please get all that to us if you have not already.
Sure. Just a couple of examples I'll share with you. One is, for example, again, the 10-year amortization. They think that's an awfully long time for such a small dollar amount, so they'd like flexibility. And another, you can well imagine, your RISE Act suggested that instead of the 50% that we go up, they're asking for 100% guarantee on that loan. So there's some things that you might find palatable and things that you may not find as palatable. But we'll give you the list.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Cassidy.